good morning.
Yep.
Ryan Thompson, good morning. Bob Doan, good morning.
Here.
Susan Matern is here.
Good morning.
And don't see Bob Don yet. And Rob Lewandowski.
Here.
So far, so good. Of course, I did that. I did that roll from our minutes, which wasn't what I intended to do. All right. So I always give Janita first opportunity so she can go back and be productive today. So what have you got for us today, Janita? Anything?
Yes, I sent the report over to Rochelle from November 1st of 2024 through December 31st of 2024. 2 engineering files were closed. One was an older one that got overlooked by the investigator. It was a dispute of facts in a civil matter. The complainant who filed the complaint was not the one who actually hired the engineer. So that's a civil matter, and that was closed. The second one is a settlement agreement on engineer Nestor that was done by the legal department, and I have no information on that as legal handled it, but it does show up in my report that it was closed. We did receive a new complaint that is open and under investigation.
Okay. Any questions? Sounds like the system is running as smoothly as possible.
We try. We do try, Mr. Chairman. So
All right.
if there's no questions, Happy New Year to you and your board. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
You know, now that the week is we have 1 week under our belt, you can no longer say Happy New Year, okay?
Oh, we can't?
That's it.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's get going. Let's hear from Trip Whalen, if he's
Thanks,
ready to go.
Yeah. Already. And I was going to wish you all a Happy New Year, but I guess I'll have 2026 for that.
Yeah.
But as a quick refresher for folks who may or may not have been on the call last time, I'm dialing in, well, actually from London at the moment, but normally situated at the consulate, the British consulate here in Boston, and have been supporting kind of the various boards across New England in pursuing the adoption of the MRA between the UK and NCEES and the individual state boards below that. Today, based upon some of the very salient and real points that you all brought up, I've invited one of my colleagues down from the embassy in DC. So Gregor, Tony, I know you were on the email chain where we got him invited. Gregor is kind of a point person between HMG, His Majesty's Government, and NCEES for a lot of this work. He's much more able to address some of these in the weed questions than I'll be able to. So I thought he'd be a great resource for you all, and especially in going forward as we kind of tease out what the main concerns are and what we can do to assuage those. He'll really be the person to help drive us to the next step here. And with that, I can turn it over to Gregor to.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Very nice to meet all of you. We in DC are struggling under snow that you would take for granted, but it's nice to speak with all of you. Yeah, if you had any specific questions about the mutual recognition agreement, I'm very happy to answer them, or anything in particular. We're delighted that the UK's Engineering Council and NCEES have reached this mutual recognition agreement. I think about 26, 27 state boards are opting into the agreement, and more are looking at it at the moment. Obviously, we're delighted to have Connecticut involved in the agreement, both to make it easier for your engineers to go and contribute to projects in the UK, and also have some UK engineers be able to come and contribute to your sector. So happy to answer any questions you have about the specifics of the agreement or how it might work.
I had one question, first of all. How many jurisdictions are being canvassed, for supporting this agreement? Is there?
In the US, I think when I was at the NCES conference, I think we had about 26 state boards signed up. A couple more have chosen to do so since the August conference in Chicago. So that's where we're at about now. 26.
All right, so we have like 50 states and a couple of territories, so less than 55, let's say. Is that, or are there more affected? That's one. And now you say there's about 26 or 27 so far that have agreed or actually signed.
Yeah, so I think you're right. It's about 55, because then you've got a couple territories, and then you've got one or two boards that are a PE board and an SE board, like
correct.
Illinois, both the PE and the SE opted in. In terms of signed, so what all of those 27-ish, 28 boards have signed letters of interest. And then from there, they've gone in and looked at their regs and their statutes and started to decide, okay, what do we need to update so we can work with this agreement? So there's about 4 boards who will begin what we call implementing the agreement early in the year. So North Carolina, Arizona, Texas and Nevada, and also Delaware. So that's 5 who all their regs will be ready to go early this year, and they'll start accepting applicants going between their state and the United Kingdom. Other states like Florida, Georgia, California, and Illinois, they're changing their statute or their regs so that they can start implementing the agreement later in the year. So everyone's in a slightly different stage, but those 28, when I say they've signed the letters of intent, that's them going away and figuring out how they're going to join the agreement.
All right.
I think another one that's close to you that's been quite advanced in this is up in Maine with David Jackson. He's been working on this from an early stage.
One of the other things, Gregor, that we discussed at the first hearing was that based on our understanding of what this document is supposed to be, which is to accommodate reciprocity between United Kingdom and the United States, and therefore it's been stated that NCEES has already agreed with, in conjunction with this agreement, that we'll just accept whatever qualifications have been granted to your UK engineers. I forget what the term was, ENG or whatever. So our problem is that trying to be to establish a reciprocity within our own United States under the guidance of NCEES, we have a bare minimum. Take our 2 exams, and after our last meeting and informal discussion, it was like, guys, the basic, simplest aspect is you come over here, take our 2 exams. A lot of states, you want to come into our state, let's say for surveying, for example, in our state, you take a local exam to make sure that you're familiar with what we do here in this state, a little bit different than what they do in Delaware, for example. So why would we not ask or have the agreement include taking this very simple exam, not that simple, but it's simple, designed to prove minimum competency in your chosen field. So it would seem to me that a qualified structural engineer from UK should come over and wants the designation as a structural engineer, should be able to take that module and pass it. So that seems not to be the case. And there was some expression of concern about that. Why would that not have been included by NCEES?
Sure, yeah, happy to go into that. When you say the exam, are you meaning the FE and PE exam, or are you meaning the local exam?
Yes, sir. No
Sure,
local exam, just the national exam. We rely on NCEES to prepare the examinations so that we can have that baseline common denominator, whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
it just seems that that should be included in this. And that's one concern. And I'm expressing it for myself and for some of the discussions we had. And the second comment is, what if we decide that we're not going to sign it? NCWS has already made an agreement, so it's kind of a fait accompli. It's done.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to answer all those questions, and I appreciate you raising them. So I think if I can do the first one, you talked about a local exam to make sure that somebody knows the Connecticut regulations versus somebody
No,
in
it's a
Delaware.
national. I'm talking about the national exam.
Okay, let's do the national exam then. I will
Yeah.
say, just on the local thing, if you've got something that's local to your jurisdiction or discipline, you can still apply that exam on top of the reciprocity.
I made a poor analogy. The point was we use the NCWS exams, plural, as a common denominator, as a minimum competency. That's all.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that's helpful. And I don't want to speak on behalf of NCWS or the Engineering Council, but I think the way that they've seen it is when you have an engineer move, as you say, from your state to Texas, you already know that they have a level of competence because they've taken the FE and the PE exam, right? And so when they come to you as a model law engineer, you say, okay, NCES and the Texas board have deemed that you have a sufficient standard, so we're going to make it quicker and easier for you to come in rather than making you take the exams again in Connecticut. That's sort of the basis of the reciprocity. So what NCES have done with the Engineering Council, they've said, well, we have looked at the way you do your competency assessment, and you've looked at the way that we do our competency assessment. And we have decided that even though the system is slightly different in the way that we review competency, the competency of our engineers is equivalent, that they are at the same level. And what we've encountered a number of times is engineers from the US who want to go to the UK, or engineers from the UK who want to go to the US, who are needed on important time-sensitive projects, like take the example of high-speed rail in California. There's an engineer in the UK who has really good expertise that Californians need, but because there is this requirement to do 2 exams to demonstrate education, to do all that paperwork, it takes them a long time to demonstrate that competence, which we know that by and large they do have. So what NCES and Engineering Council have said is, okay, we've looked at each other's competency. We think it's equivalent. We don't want to add duplicative assessment onto engineers. We want to be able to get them to work on these projects quickly, but still check their competence. And so the way that they've done that is they've reviewed each other's reviews, and then an independent group, the International Engineering Alliance, they've reviewed the competency assessment of both bodies, and they've deemed it to be reciprocal. Now, the standards are still very high. You can't just be a PE or chartered engineer. You have to be an international PE or an international chartered engineer. But then once you have that, you are able to move over without having to take duplicative assessment. Now, it's entirely up to your board if you decide that you don't want to opt into that agreement, and you've made the case there that you would prefer everybody just take the exam, and indeed that's something that is in your board's care. If you don't opt in, the point then is that Connecticut engineers would not be able to fast track the process. And I think that's sometimes the point. I know that the folks that you have tested have gone through a very rigorous process, and I've made that point to the Engineering Council. If a Connecticut engineer wants to go and work on a time-sensitive project in the UK, it takes a very long time to become a chartered engineer. It's not just studying up for exams, but it's review panels. We have a system more akin to like a PhD viva, where you have to defend your experience and your projects, and that just takes time. And personally, from what I've seen, from what the Engineering Council has seen, what the International Engineering Alliance has seen, we don't think that's necessary. We would like to be able to grant reciprocity to your engineers, and that's why we want this agreement to work. It's about recognizing the high standards that are already there, and then making sure we're not applying duplicative assessment.
All right. So taking the situation where we do opt in, and the engineer from UK wants to come and work in Connecticut, what's the process? He just comes over and says, I'm going to work in Connecticut, or is there some kind of an application process,
Yeah, there's a very
registration process.
Yeah, there's very thorough process for that, which involves both yourselves and the NCEES. So the way it would work is if Connecticut opts into this agreement, the engineer, provided he has reached that high standards of being an international chartered engineer, he sends his application to the Engineering Council in the UK and says, "Hey, I want to go work in Connecticut." The Engineering Council sends all of his paperwork, which demonstrates both his competency and also a clean bill of health on the, what do you call it, like the discipline point, that he's got no disciplinary issues. I forget the terminology. They would then distribute it to you at the board and say, "Hey, this individual has met all the requirements under the mutual recognition agreement. He is an international chartered engineer. We are therefore content to provide him with an international PE license," and then they would give it to you as a board. And I think at that point, it's up to you as a board how you want to do any final third checks. But it's effectively the same as when you get someone coming to you from NCS and saying, "Hey, this is a model law engineer." It's just instead the certificate will say, "This is an international professional engineer."
Okay. Anybody
And so-
else have a comment or concern or question that Gregor could answer?
I will. You say there's a slight difference in the way the two systems work, and I completely disagree. The whole thing seems to me preposterous. Here's what's required in the US. There are 4 steps. You need an undergraduate degree in engineering. UK engineers get an undergraduate degree in engineering, their equivalent. I have no problems with this. You need experience. UK engineers get good experience just as US engineers do. So there's no difference in those two. It's the exams. The first exam tests the fundamentals of engineering. We require it. Many applicants who take that exam do not pass the first time, even those from some good schools. What you're saying is that UK engineers wouldn't have to take it, so they immediately get excused. It's not fair to students or applicants in the US that they have to take it and those from UK do not. The second exam is even of a bigger concern to me. The second exam, and I'm a structural engineer, I'm also a professor of structural engineering, or retired, test your ability to use the current specifications in the United States to do design. Again, what you're saying is UK engineers can be excused from that. That's wrong. They have no experience with some of our codes and standards. And to just let them come in and practice without having to do that, again, it's a question of fairness. Why should US applicants have to go through those exams and applicants from abroad do not? I just don't get it. I don't even know why this has been carried on as far as it has.
All right, thank you. Was that John who was saying that?
John DeWolf, yes.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Professor Wolf. Yeah, I mean, I guess part of this is sort of, it's up to the board what your approach is to reciprocity. I know that you have intra-US reciprocity between states and whether you want to do it internationally. That's certainly a question for the board. I think the way that the Engineering Council, NCEES, and the International Engineering Alliance has looked at it is, sure, if you look at your exams, it's a very thorough process. But if you come and ask a UK engineer if they think they've gone through a very thorough process, they will break out in cold sweats remembering what they had to go through to get their chartered engineering. And it wasn't exactly the same as the way you did it. They didn't sit down and take the exact same test. But it is a very thorough process, which a lot of people take a long time to pass and don't always get it right the first, second, third time. That was part of, in February last year, I took a group over with leadership from NCEES and then a number of state boards, including David Jackson, who came from Maine. And they put those questions to the engineering council and wanted to learn how we did our assessment. And they came away with the conclusion that it was just as rigorous. I've been fortunate in some of these calls when I spoke to the Illinois Engineering Board. They actually had a member of their board who was both a chartered engineer. He'd gone through that process and he'd gone through the process as a PE. And certainly I can only tell you what his conclusion was, and that it was a different way of doing it, but it was just as taxing, time-consuming, and thorough. And so because both processes are so thorough and take so much time, in today's interconnected world, we want to make sure that engineers are able to contribute without undue delay to the necessary infrastructure projects that both our countries are facing. And that's why NCES, along with the Engineering Council, have decided that when someone meets the highest standards, when they're an international PE or they're an international chartered engineer, that they think it's within both sides' interests to create this thoroughly tested pathway. You mentioned one point there, Professor DeWolf, on local standards, and that's certainly something.
I'm not talking about local standards. I'm talking about national standards. The steel design, concrete design, and all are done under national codes.
Yes. If there is any jurisdiction or discipline specific testing that you don't think is covered by the British standards, then every state board under the agreement has the option to add that. So let's take the example of California. So California will be opting into the agreement, but they have a lot more seismic activity out on the west than we do in London or Wolverhampton. So any British engineer who's wanting to become licensed in California will have to pass an additional seismic exam. So that's entirely proper under the agreement.
Okay, so we have the option of accepting an engineer when an application is presented, and if we make the decision not to sign on, it doesn't preclude a future board from entering, and it would not in any way jeopardize what NCEES has negotiated with UK.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly right.
Okay. So again, it's a case-by-case basis when an applicant applies, and we can consider it at that time.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
absolutely fine.
Hey,
That
Tony, can we require that applicant to take the PE exam?
Well, that's what we're saying here, is that those are our standards, So if NCEES is recommending to each board or jurisdiction that they find the education and the licensing process equivalent to what they believe is the standard here in the US, we can accept that recommendation, or our mandate is still take both exams. You may decide at that point that, okay, you want to be a structural engineer, then at least take the structural module. We could make that decision. But as John points out, our basic standard is that if you haven't taken the 2 exams, it's not fair to all the other applicants, and it is still a minimum competency demonstration. So our ultimate decision to sign on or not does not jeopardize the program that NCEES has negotiated. And as Gregor just pointed out, California has already said, okay, we'll go along with you, but you're going to take our seismic exam. And we're saying, okay, we'll go along with you, but you got to take our 2 exams. What's the difference?
I think, Mr. Chair, the point on the difference then is if you're still requiring the PE and FE exam, then that's not how the MRA works. And therefore, Connecticut engineers would have to go through the professional review process if they want to become a chartered engineer in the UK. But that's entirely the board's discretion.
It's quid pro quo. That's what we have to recognize.
I want to add a point. It's worth noting that you can still come over and practice, but you would have to work with a PE if you came to the US from the UK, or vice versa. If I went to London or somewhere in the UK to practice, I would have to work with somebody who's licensed there. It doesn't mean I can't do design. It doesn't mean I can't bring my expertise to UK, or a UK engineer can't bring their expertise to this country. They just need to work with somebody who's licensed. It doesn't mean that they can't work if they don't have a license.
Yes, that's exactly
Understood.
right.
Yeah. Okay. I think you've given us a lot more to think about, and we have to make our deadline today. So I do appreciate you, Gregor, and you're well versed in it. And you made a good point in that if we don't sign on to the agreement, then it's quid pro quo, if you want to use that term. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Okay, understood. Any other questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you, Gregor, and thank you, Trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you.
thank you, Tony. Thank you, board. Be in touch.
All right, so at this point, I would like to accommodate Rob's commitment and skip over to that part of the agenda, because his input is very important. And that would bring us to page 5 of our regular agenda for review of applicants for reciprocity.
All right, I'm going to parse this up a little bit, Tony. There's a lot here, and there's a few outliers. Tanchin Hugh, he is a non-model law with a foreign degree. NCEES evaluate him and deemed him equivalent. So I'll leave that alone for now. Going down the list, Hong Ping Zhang is also not a model law. And due to a foreign degree, NCEES evaluated, deemed that person equivalent. So I'll leave that at that. Keep going down the list. Luis Osorio Sanchez was not a model law due to a foreign degree. NCEES evaluated the degree and deemed them not equivalent. The not equivalent was over electives. They exceeded the math and science. The engineering requirement is 48 credits. They had 79, so they far exceeded the engineering credits. General education, general education, they were required 23 credits. They only had 12, so they're 11 credits short. But then they had another 41 credits of miscellaneous classes that didn't seem to be allocated, one of which was very similar to one of the other ones that was recognized. With all that said and done, the not equivalency is a result of electives, many of which were not even considered. I'm not sure why. So in my mind, the math, science, engineering, and the other parts are equivalent or exceeding. Therefore, I deemed them equivalent. Any questions on those non-model law foreign degree?
They sound good to me.
Yeah, I think your analysis of the electives is important. Good.
Yeah, like I said, they had 41 credits, none of which were taken. Again, one of them was an English class that they took 3 other English classes, but not that one. So all right, so that's that. Then one more outlier, Kyle Merchant is not a model law because he has a tech degree, a Bachelor of Science of Civil Engineering tech degree from Old Dominion. He has, I don't know, he graduated from Old Dominion in 2018, So if he was continuously employed from 2018 to date, he would only have 6 and change years, would not have enough to get to qualify with the tech degree. But when you dig deeper into his job history, and I give him the benefit of the doubt, giving him every bit of time as engineering time, and add it all up, it's only 3 years, 11 months. So without a doubt, he's short of experience. So I'll start by saying Kyle Merchant, Tony,
Yep.
based on not enough years of experience, I recommend deny his application.
Rob, how many, what's his education?
Bachelor of Science of Civil Engineering Technology from Old Dominion.
And no master's degree?
Well, I'll give you the whole line. He has an initial degree in Bachelor's in Environmental Design from UMass Amherst. Then he has must have been a dual degree, Bachelor's in Horticulture from UMass Amherst. Then he went back to school and got a Bachelor's in Civil Engineering Technology from Old Dominion. And he had some other classes on top of that. So yeah, no master's degree.
Okay.
So I would second your motion.
Yeah, and to add up to those 3 years and 11 months, there was 3 employers, starting and stopping with gaps in employment in between. So like I said, if I give a complete benefit of the doubt, it's 3 years, 11 months. It's not even close to the minimum 7 years. So I think it's a pretty easy.
Moved and seconded to deny based on lack of experience for the technology degree in accordance with our regulations. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to deny Kyle Merchant reciprocity at this time, say aye.
Aye.
Any
opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
All right, so now I'll go back to the balance of the list, Tony. 3 non-model law. I explained those. Outside of that, everybody else is model law with good degrees, good experience. Therefore, I recommend approval for the balance of the list under my name.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. While I have Rob still as a captive audience, I'd like to do the minutes so we have everybody involved that was here. Oh, actually, Rob, you weren't there last.
I wasn't here.
We can defer that until later. All right, let's move back to the regular agenda then. First page, page 2 actually, is a review by John DeWolf of a reconsideration of
Tony, excuse me for a second. Sorry, it's
What?
Jane. Rob has a couple applications on the supplemental.
You're right. Thank you for keeping me up to date. There we go. Page 2 of our supplemental, Class 4 reciprocity, Donahoe through Garzini.
Yeah, I reviewed them, Tony. They're all model law, all good degrees, all good experience, all straightforward applications. So I recommend approval for all of them.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve Donahoe through Garzini on page 2 of our supplemental agenda for Class 4 reciprocity, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing on that, motion carries. And then, did we have anything else, Rob, on your?
No, that was it. And
Right.
Tony, I'll stay on until I have to
Yeah.
leave.
Whatever, yeah, okay, appreciate that. Okay, Francisco Sanchez Dominici, and the endorsements were missing in our last meeting. And John DeWolf reviewed those.
One of the PEs he worked under has endorsed his application, so it's now fine. I recommend approval.
Thank you, John. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion to approve Francisco Sanchez Dominici for Class 1 credit parts 1 and 2, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right, then John DeWolf reviewed one more for reconsideration, Kevin Beck.
We requested at the last meeting that his education needed to be evaluated. It was evaluated. There are no deficiencies, so I move approval of Beck for Class 4 license.
Thank you, John. This is second.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of the motion to approve Kevin Beck for Class 4 reciprocity, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Bob Doan reviewed the next two for reconsideration. In the case of Cassandra K. Moody, it was a degree, did not qualify at that time. So we want to take them separately. Bob?
No, there's no need to. I think that I make a motion to have them have their education evaluated by NCEES.
Okay. Both of them, Brandon Rexford and Cassandra Moody,
Yes.
for the same reason. So there's a motion to require Cassandra Moody and Brandon Rexford to have NCEES evaluate their education curriculum as consistent with the model law. So a second to
that.
Bob's.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Richard. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to deny based on, until we have an evaluation of Moody and Rexford, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries to deny at this time. Moving on to page 3 of our regular agenda, we had a list of candidates who passed the CBT exams. There were 16 applicants, 12 civil, 2 mechanical, 2 electrical. The point of notice is just information. And then item E. Why are we doing that one now? The review, these are applicants for Class 1 exam credit part 1. In other words, I have the EIT. So John DeWolf reviewed them, Adam O. through Thorland on page 4 of our regular agenda.
Okay, I want to go to Mr. Butcher. But he graduated in May 2020. The experience on his application, he lists 1221 to 1224, 3 years experience. And then the next line lists 1021 to 1022, so he's doubling up time. He doesn't show 4 years of experience. He only shows 3, unless he didn't fill the form out correctly. So I move that Butcher be denied for lack of 4 years of acceptable experience.
Is there a second? I didn't hear that. Was that you, Richard?
Yes. I just keep moving things along.
I know without your picture, I can't see your lips moving.
You
so I
know,
don't
for some strange reason, if I turn off that thing, I just have a blank screen.
I know. It's
I'm
okay.
not sure why.
We like the mountains. It's a nice background.
It's a
All right,
beautiful.
it's been moved and seconded to deny for lack of experience, Mr. Chandler Boucher. All those in favor of the motion to deny, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries to deny.
Okay, then the next one is close. The form doesn't show the degree or anything. I don't have, it just says they want to graduate from University of Connecticut, but it doesn't give any times, doesn't say what the degree is.
The application's incomplete.
The application, unless the thing is that it's the cut in the photocopying is at that point. So you go from one page to the next and it just doesn't fill. So the application's incomplete. So I would recommend that
Table.
Mr. Gross fill in the application correctly.
Okay, it's been moved that the application for Natalia Close be tabled. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rob. All those in favor of the motion to table Natalia Close's application for Class 1 exam pending updating the application, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carried.
Okay, I have one question for Jane. Jessica DeSantos, the application has her actual picture pasted on. Do I need to return that to you?
No, you
Okay,
do not. Thank you.
okay. So I will move that from Adamo to Thorland be approved with the exception of Butcher and Close.
Second.
Thank you, Robert. All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. So we had 2 out of that list. I reviewed the next group of applicants for Class 4 reciprocity. Only one thing of note in that I'm always surprised that when I see it, but the West Point is not accredited. It's not a model law engineer, which I just find interesting. Nevertheless, my recommendation is to approve the entire list, Aquesta through Verho on page 4, and 4 applicants, Chapman through Donza on page 5. We had only 2 non-model law engineers, but all good experience and good education. And I never know really why they're not model law. I can't figure it out. But anyway, my recommendation is to approve. Is there a second to my motion to
Second.
approve?
Well, I can make that motion for you. I'm not sure that you make that motion.
I can make the motion. I decided last month, why am I not recommending approval? I said,
All
why
right.
do I have to do that? I don't need
Okay.
you to tell me that it's okay.
Okay, fine, fine.
So I decided
then.
last month, if you were paying attention,
I must have not
Anyway.
been paying attention. I must have been sleeping that day.
I move that these applicants be approved for reciprocity. Is there a second to my motion?
I second it. I'll
Who
second.
was
I
that? John? Thank you, John. You know, some people have been out in the cold too long.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
Well, it's
all those in
finally
favor of
turning
my
daylight
motion?
here, so
What's that?
it's finally turning daylight. The sun's not up.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Now, Bob Doan reviewed the next group of applicants on page 5 for reciprocity, DeGraff through Guzas.
Okay, most of them are model law. There are a couple of foreign degrees that were missing, general ed and electives, similar to the cases that Rob talked about. But they all had adequate experience in exams, etc. Lee Gu, we need to verify his license, continued license. His North Carolina license expired the end of December. So with that condition, I'll make a motion to approve the entire group from DeGraff to Guzas.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rob. All those in favor of the motion to approve DeGraff through Guzas on page 5 of our regular agenda for reciprocity, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Richard reviewed the next group of applicants for reciprocity, Pinto on page 5 and Raja through Wiley on page 6.
Okay, they were all model law except for one, Ramos Ramundo, who had a degree from Brazil, but it was deemed equivalent. And I had the same, condition where, a lot of or quite a few of the applicants that their original license that they had was expired, but they had other states where they were still licensed engineer. So I was just utilizing the other states where they were licensed as, documentation that they were still practicing engineering. So with that said, I'll make a motion that we accept all 20, applicants that I reviewed from
There a second?
Pinto to Wiley.
I'll second.
Thanks, Robert. Been moved and second to approve Pinto and Raja through Wiley for Class 4 reciprocity. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Ryan and Susan, did you get a chance to look at Andrew Arneson?
Yes. So he has the 8 years experience and a civil engineering degree. Ryan, did you take a look at it?
So I didn't actually see his application. I'm not sure what happened. I got all the engineering ones. I got all the, so Jane, I'm not sure what happened there, but so I didn't get a chance to review it.
Okay, but based on Susan's thorough review, it sounds like the applicant complies with our requirements for Class 6 exam credit part 1. Is that your motion, Susan?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve Andrew Arneson's application.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Rob. So all those in favor of the motion to approve Andrew Arneson for Class 6 exam for the credit for part 1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Now we have a list of applicants for Class 9 license past the EIT, Barnett through Kingston, Kothwalla through Thompson on page 7. The motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Do a second.
Second.
Thank you, John. I got Richard down here. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And we have one more reinstatement by land surveyor, John Paul Marine. Signed and sealed some documents, yes. List of projects, yes. Continuously licensed, no. Bob Doan reviewed.
I make a motion to approve the reinstatement. It's been actually, compared to other reinstatements, this has only been since January of this year, or
Right.
I'm sorry, 2024. So I make
And
a
again,
motion.
under our regulations, we shall reinstate, so it's a formality, but
Correct.
all done. So it's been moved to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ryan. All those in favor of the motion to approve reinstatement of Mr. John Paul Marine, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And now Bob reviewed Sharif Abuzab for reinstatement as a professional engineer.
Correct. He has, excuse me, he hasn't been licensed in the state since 2015. He's been working elsewhere. I reviewed his entire application. He meets our requirements. He had a foreign degree that was evaluated. And I make a motion to approve the reinstatement.
Thank you, Bob. The second?
Second,
Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion to reinstate Sharif Abu Saab, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And except for the notice that our next meeting is February 11th, that concludes our regular agenda, which moves us over to our supplemental agenda. I reviewed the reconsideration of the applicant, Ryan Meacham. On the reconsideration, he had all the education, all the experience, so our reason for denying or tabling, let me just see, I have my notes here, I just moved my notes. At any rate, I did review it and I find him to be qualified, so I would recommend, my motion is to approve Ryan Meacham for Class 4 reciprocity. And thank you, Jane, for sending me that again, because I missed it the first time, but everything is in order. So is there a second to my motion to approve Ryan Meacham?
I'll second.
Cool. Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And our next group of applicants are Class 1 exam credit part 1 reviewed by John DeWolf, Kuhn through Sutterby on page 1 of our supplemental agenda.
I just want to note that Kuhn has one of the 5 recommenders of Kuhn appears to be a relative. It's got the same name, but that's okay. I checked the thing. But nevertheless, I'm going to move that from Kuhn to Sutterby be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve Kuhn through Sutterby for Class 1 credit part 1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Bob Doan reviewed Ambrosio and through Dank on our supplemental agenda for Class 4 reciprocity on page 2.
Okay, since a few months ago, when John mentioned the verifier and making sure that the one who recommends them as part of their experience, I've been paying more attention to that. And Badruzzaman is 5 recommenders. None of them are in his employment verification. And that is the same for Brooks.
Where do they work?
John, I have trouble with the supplemental applications because I review them online, and I'd rather have the applications in front of me, and I find it easier to flip back and forth. And I noticed that this month particularly, we have an abundance of supplemental applications. If there's any way to minimize that, I can answer your questions better with a paper copy in front of me, and I can flip through. To answer that question now, I'd have to go back into my emails and find it.
I have an email from Jane earlier, a couple days ago, I think it was, for an electric boat. Somebody works there, and none of the persons that this candidate worked under were registered as PEs. And the question is, what do you do about that?
Yeah.
And basically you have to look at who's recommending. So I don't think it's necessary to have a PE, but if one of these worked at, say, Sikorsky, there may not have anybody that is a PE that can recommend them.
Right. They did have PEs recommending them. They just weren't in their work experience.
Did they have, so nobody with their work experience is recommending them.
Right.
Then I don't think they should, I would go along with not approving. They should be able to get somebody they worked under to approve them.
Okay.
Just so you know, like when I send you the class 4's paper, you don't even get the endorsers at all.
Well,
The
we
only
get
time
there.
the only time you see them is when you get the NCS record when I send it online, the electronic copy. Because when I
No.
don't print off that.
Jane, we do get them on the summary sheet from NCEES.
Right, you do when you get it electronically, but when I send you the paper, it's not in there because I don't print it off.
I'm sorry, it is on the paper copies that I received. It's on the first page of their NCEES where it lists if they're a model law or not. The 5 references are listed on that page.
Oh, I was thinking the fit like each individual, because in their NCS record they actually write it out. Like I don't send you that. I didn't realize it was on the first page.
Yes, it is.
Sorry. Okay, my apologies.
Well, I may have to take a closer look because I never pay attention or have not paid close attention to whether or not they were workers. I've been scanning more closely to see if there's any negatives, but I never really paid a lot of attention to whether or not they were prior supervisors. I'm just thinking of in my own, collective convenience of if I were to do it today, who would I be, seeking?
Yeah.
Well, Murray Reich is long dead, I mean, it's a long time ago.
Yep.
You follow?
Yeah, the only time that I look at the references is for, the actual taking of the test of, for, the principles of engineering. But once they pass the principles of engineering, I don't necessarily look at the references again, only because sometimes they might be, they might have 35 years of experience and they're not going to go back and get their, initial mentors to sign off.
Correct.
I agree with that. Here we have, two individuals that are applying for reciprocity, and we really don't know the background and how, you can't tell us right now, Bob, how long they've been working in the current location, and now he's a principal in charge. He doesn't really need any what do you call it, supervisors, but his colleagues, recognize his ability.
Right. So the only time I do that, look at the actual references is for the actual taking of the, fundamentals in engineering exam. But otherwise, I don't necessarily look at, the fact that, the references might not necessarily.
Right. I agree with Richard. What I think you're saying is that the individual taking his PE exam and he's just got 4 years and 1 month, you'd want to know that his supervisor felt that he was a qualified engineer and heading in the right direction.
Correct.
But a guy coming in for reciprocity, he's been working 20 years either by himself or, for a firm. He doesn't have a supervisor anymore.
Correct. So, yeah. So I think that would be a more prudent way of looking at the references in terms of, scrutinizing the references anyways.
I want to just add, that makes sense to me. The one that one of the first 2 I looked at was somebody who was not endorsed by somebody they worked under, but that was in order to take the second exam. So when I look, and I've been getting the ones where they're applying to take the second exam. So I'm being a lot more careful with those to make sure that there's a recommender that they've worked on.
Right. I agree.
I agree with that. Yes.
For class 4, I don't think it's necessary.
Correct.
Okay. Then for both of these, the experience was good, the education was good, and I would view that as just a now minor technology, technicality. So
Correct.
I will amend my motion to approve Ambrogio to Danik for class 4 license.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Richard. All those in favor of the motion to approve Ambrosio through Danik, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And I note at around 10 o'clock, Rob has had to leave. So thank you, Rob. And we'll move on now to the next group of applicants for class 4 reciprocity, Gabalat through Lamathi, reviewed by Richard Swezak for class 4 reciprocity.
They were all model law, and again, I just used, the fact that, they had an active, I guess, prevent an engineering license in another state, not necessarily in their initial state of, documentation, so to verify that they are still continuously, registered. So I'll make a motion, we accept all 5 of them.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. And Ryan, you have a long list from Lancy to Zai on page 2 of the supplemental agenda for class 4 reciprocity.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start with Sandbo, William Sandbo.
Yes.
He's not model law, and the reason is because he's got a physics degree, bachelor's in physics. He does have a master's in civil from Cornell, but a bachelor's in physics. And that's, I mean, as I understand it from previous discussions, that's not considered acceptable. So unless I'm mistaken, I would recommend that he be denied.
You could deny with the chance that the evaluation might change the opinion. Would you agree with that, John, or just it's physics, it's physics?
Unless he took a lot of courses for the masters prior to the courses he needed for the masters, I don't see how he can possibly meet the requirements. He doesn't have a 4-year engineering degree, so I would deny because of lacking a 4-year engineering degree.
I'll take that as a second to the motion.
Yes.
Yeah,
John,
I mean,
could you comment on the difference between an undergraduate engineering course and a master's engineering course if they took the same subject? Is it the same? Would you consider those equivalent?
No, the master's is more of a specialty degree. You take it in a specific area, where the undergraduate is a broader degree, and you have more.
Yeah, I mean, like an individual course. If I had a structural course in as an undergraduate, and then I took to make up for that lack of a course, if I took a structural course in a master's curriculum, would there be a difference in those two courses?
Yeah, well, there was when I was teaching, because I taught undergraduate steel design and I taught graduate steel design. And I had to review what was in the undergraduate course. It was only about 20% of the course. I went into a lot more depth in specific areas.
Okay.
In the graduate course. So I would say the graduate course, undergraduate course, I think either one would be acceptable in terms of applying for license. But
Okay.
You still need that broad experience you get from a 4-year engineering degree. That's what the model law says.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Here's the just reading off the list of classes he took for his master's degree. It's seminar civil infrastructure, foundation engineering, structural mechanics, finite element analysis of solids and structures, concrete structures, advanced behavior of metal structures. Elasto, that word is pixelated, it's hard to see. Behavior of materials. LRFD, design based engineer of wood structure, project structure engineering, project management, engineering, fracture mechanics, and then introduction to wines.
What's the total number of credits, Ryan?
Total number of credits is, I'm not sure where, it doesn't actually say. It's all, it doesn't look like it's actually even 2 years. It looks like it's fall 2006 and spring 2007.
See, I have a master's from Cornell, and it was a 9-month program that I did. It was for design. My doctorate's from there too, but my master's was. So he has a typical master's. He has a 1-year master's, but he doesn't have the 4-year engineering degree. I think it's a clear-cut denial.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured. I just wanted to make sure I brought it up because I don't want to deny somebody inappropriately. So that would be the only denial, and so I guess I would recommend a denial on that one.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to deny William Sandbo due to a lack of qualifying undergraduate degree. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries.
The remainder, with the exception of Sandbo, all but 2 of them were model law, but the 2 that were not were deemed, well, one was deemed equivalent, one was not, but it wasn't in the engineering, it was in the other classes. So, and they all have lots of experience, and I don't see any reason to deny that. So I would recommend approval of everybody else from Lancey to Zhao, with the exception of Sandbo.
Second. Thank you, Richard. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Then we do have the minutes from our last meeting to consider. And I personally went through them, and I think we covered everything again today, those that were tabled or denied. Therefore, are there any comments, additions, or corrections to the minutes from November 19th? If not, is there a motion to accept?
So move.
Second.
Who was that second? Richard?
No, give it to Bob.
No, give it to
Oh,
Richard.
Bob Doan. Hey, I gotta be fast. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carried.
Tony, do we have to take any action on the UK request?
I think we can have a little bit more discussion, and I don't think we have any problem. We don't have to sign on, and I think that John's position, as stated at the initial hearing, is still adequate, valid, well thought out.
Yeah,
I agree
I
with
tend to
John.
agree. The only thing that impressed me today was the fact that they have a holding company where they become an international, professional engineer. So not only do they have to take the test and pass, but then they get evaluated by the international group to make sure that they're still, consistent with the entire process that's going on. So I think I feel a little better about the fact that they're more or less equivalent. But again, what we can do is we can handle each application on a case-by-case basis. We don't necessarily need to do it carte blanche.
Right. NCWS went off and said, we're going to give you this other opportunity. But we don't have to accept it on face value or because they said so. And I think that John's point originally raised, last month was 2 months ago, is still valid. Just look at the example of California. You
Correct.
want to come and practice here, you still have to do this. And we say, if you want to practice here, you still have to do this. So, you know, on the other hand, you can take this sometime on a case-by-case basis and say, okay, in this case, we're willing. We can't necessarily mortgage the future, I like to say. If the next board wants to accept everything, they can make that and sign on. There's no limit to it.
And I believe that, you know, John said that they can practice engineering. It's just that they're not going to be licensed in the state. You know,
Right.
as long as they're working with another, it's just that they just can't come over from England and open up the, you know, their own little, you know, stand to do engineering, you know, without, you know, taking our exam. And I agree with that. If they can do all the design they want, you know, under the, you know, the purview of another engineer, but, you know, they just can't necessarily start opening up, you know, a professional engineering firm type thing.
I have to, I'm sorry, I just have to have like a little bit of a dissenting opinion here. I think that maybe perfectly valid for structural. I'm not a structural engineer, but I think John's point is pretty valid, especially when there's national codes and, you know, structural and steel and concrete and everything. That probably makes sense. But for what I do for civil, I don't know that it makes that much sense. You know, to design a stormwater management system or septic system here in Connecticut, I don't imagine is significantly different than it is in, you know, the UK, you know, somewhere. I just don't. So I do think that it's not necessarily something that, well, I guess what I should say is I don't think we should just discredit it. Like, I don't think that they necessarily need to go through and take the PE exam for water resources, because, you know, I can't think of, well, I guess, you know, there's some specific codes that maybe apply, but they're certainly, you know, they can find them, they can download them, they can buy them from the various agencies that, you know, that they need to, you know, if it's highway design, they can, you know, get the AASHTO books, you know, and you know, they can download that and they can follow it just like anybody else. They can follow the code after they read it, and the, you know, ethics, you know, would ensure that they make sure that they're familiar with the codes. So I don't, and, you know, and they're professionals that are duly licensed in their own, you know, in the UK. I don't necessarily think we shouldn't respect that. I think maybe it was Richard had brought up last time that, you know, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, clearly they have, you know, they build structures over there and they build civil works and infrastructure all the time that has withstood the test of time and doesn't fall down. And so, you know, and it is very safe. So why wouldn't we give some credence to that? You know, it's the proof is that they do it and that they have a system that's rigorous. And, you know, maybe that doesn't apply to structural. You know, I think that there's valid points on the structural part, but the rest of it, I don't necessarily agree.
I think you make some valid points, Ryan. The problem is fairness. Our applicants in the US have to take both exams. What they have to do is go before somebody and talk to them. There's no consistency in what they do to get approval. Whereas with the exams, there's consistency. And the other thing is with the PE, you have a professional engineering license, which doesn't specify which area it's in. It's broad. And so I do have problems with that, but I think it's a fairness question. Why do our American applicants have to take both exams and theirs don't?
I was initially cynical about the whole thing. Is why did NCAAS think it's necessary? That's one, because they aren't selling exams because they're already accepting the exam from UK. So that's it. And I don't know how much.
There are no exams in the UK.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So it's not like NCAAS went over and initiated a conversation about an MRA because they were going to have a larger exposure for exams. They went to Japan or South Korea to do to have testing sites for more exams. So it's not a money-making venture for NCEES. And, you know, when was the last time we had an applicant from the UK? The only guy that was applied was in jail. So I'm not really worried about, let's see what happens. I don't think we're obligated to sign on. And you know, it's not like NCEES is going to cut us off from their services, you know, as an extortion.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see if anybody comes, and then we can decide.
Makes sense.
Okay.
But now the question is, do we have to make a formal decision as a board as to whether or not we want to ratify, or do we want to think about it and discuss it for a formal vote when everybody's here, including our public member, in February?
If I would say we just let it ride, because until NCEES comes to us, we don't really have to do anything. We just stick with what we're doing.
Right.
What
So-
we're doing is requiring both exams.
I would like then, Jane, to put that on the agenda for February 11th for discussion, and John can make that motion and we can decide.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Is there anything else today?
I could just mention one thing. Rachel Dearborn had invited me to attend a Zoom meeting with applicants concerning the application and some concerns that they had. So I sat in on the meeting, and it was very informative, and they are going to be getting their concerns or questions about the application together, sending them to Rachel, and I will follow through with her, and then bring them to you, to the surveyor members, to discuss the LS application and what maybe can be done to, as you say, refine it for the future.
Right. That's very good. And that's one thing that over the years we've been saying, is that the application doesn't reflect what's actually being done in the way of experience or practice. And did you say Rachel Dearborn or Rachel Heiberg?
Rachel Dearborn, she's the instructor up at Central Connecticut.
Oh, okay. All right.
And she's also been doing quite a few other classes or seminars through CALS recently. So she's really interested in getting people licensed, and so she called together this Zoom meeting with many of her students who were in the process of filling out the application. And they seem to have the most angst, from what I could get, with the time breakdown, and that they have to do it in 2 different places. And because, you know, it's not like it used to be where there was a 3-man field crew and you had a specific job as a rod man and a specific job as an instrument operator and party chief. You're sometimes doing all those things themselves, or with a 2-person crew. So the breakdown was a bit confusing to them, but I'm sure that, you know, with enough input, we can work through it.
You know what's ironic, Susan, is now with a lot of robotics, that individual is actually someone who demonstrates a much more knowledge about what he's actually doing. You see? And to me, that's what has to be done on the application, is recognize the skills that we now require. And that often translates into more knowledge by default, because you have to get from A to B. And when you're using a robot, it changes the way you approach your survey.
Right.
And therefore, we all recognize it. We don't have a rod man. It's an anachronistic application. It's not accurate anymore. It doesn't have any bearing on what we actually do. So yes, it's a very important thing to get past that, if in fact that's what's been discouraging individuals from taking the exams.
Well,
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't think that would be the only thing. I just think, I'm not sure why a lot of applicants don't have the fire in their belly. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yep, we'll stay at it. I think that's very important. And if Rachel is enthusiastically encouraging her students, that would be another good thing.
She is. She typically has, though, a lot of people who are going into civil engineering, but she's really trying hard to steer them into becoming land surveyors as well.
Good.
No
Okay.
offense to all you civil engineers there.
Well, the civil engineering programs used to have surveying and everybody enjoyed that. And I think as an engineer, being hands-on in any aspect of site work is extremely important, because the two guys we just hired, the terminology is like a blank stare. You know, just some of the basic stuff about civil engineering, putting a pipe from A to B, figuring out the contours, they just don't have it. So seeing is believing. And if you have some hands-on in the field with even a basic surveying course, you learn a tremendous amount.
Definitely.
So, anyway, that's it. So we're in the heavy-duty training program for a couple of graduate engineers, which is a really arduous task, I must say. Do you agree, Mr. Doan?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Any other business?
Nope.
We don't have Al, so somebody has to stand up here and.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn, and hopefully next time you'll be able to see my pretty face.
Okay. Not that there's a consensus that it's necessary to see your face, but anyway, Richard, enjoy that weather out there, whatever it is. Now, that's a motion to adjourn. Who's going to second that?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn at 10:23, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good month, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
See
Thank
you
you.
later. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.